right, so thank you all for joining me. Thank you for inviting me in. This parsha is actually especially very connected to me too. I am Efrem Reis. I am the assistant director of the Hebrew Free Burial Association. We're a national organization. No, we're not a Hittite, and I'm Efrem. I'm not Efrem, so don't worry about that either. But I am the assistant director of the Hebrew Free Burial Association, which is an organization that works throughout the country to make sure that anybody who needs a Jewish burial can get one, even if they can't afford it. And so this is actually one of our big weeks that we send out to all the rabbis. Hey, come on, talk about us. We share out this information because of this story that I'm going to share with you right now. And I'm going to tie that in a little bit to my love of ancient Roman history. I was for a little while, a ancient history major, and I have a minor in classic ancient Mediterranean studies. So I know a lot about the Romans. Really, my passion is Jews during the Julio-Claudian period. I can really talk those up for a while. But, and I'll actually tell you a story with Rabbi Foster and I in Rome at the end of this, and me being obsessed with going to a place that wasn't so great to go to. So our parsha starts off, it's actually like this sadly beautiful segue, right? Last week we ended the parsha with the Akedah, and the first thing we hear about it, there are Meforshim, there are sages who say that this is connected. First thing we hear about is that Sarah dies, right? So the Meforshim will tell you that it was hearing what had happened with Yitzhak, and that Yitzhak did not return with Abraham. It was very clear at the end. Abraham went home. Yitzhak went on his own way. I don't blame Yitzhak for that. But Sarah hearing that and feeling that emotion, she dies. I like to read it that way at least, because I think there's just such a real depth of emotion there. So Abraham now is faced with the first real challenge of being a Canaan and living in Canaan, which is he doesn't own land. Right? I'll talk about that more at Shul a little bit later in my Torah, but he doesn't own land. And what does that mean that he's in this place? So what I want you to do is I'm going to read this little section from Bereshit, and then maybe I'll ask you guys to think about what questions come up. This is the style of a Barbanel, who is one of the Meforshim, who would ask questions at the end of reading something and say, okay, what are my questions that I want to get answered? And so sometimes the questions are very helpful. So Abraham rose from beside his dead, beside Sarah, and spoke to the Hittim, for the Hittites, and said, I am a resident alien among you. Sell me a burial site from among you, that I may remove my dead for burial. And the Hittites replied to him, saying, Curious, my lord, you are the elect of God among us. Bury your dead in your choicest of burial places. None of us will hold a burial place from you for buying your dead. Then Abraham bows down low to the ground and says, landowning citizens, Hittite, if it is your wish that I remove my dead for burial, then you must agree to intercede with me on behalf of Efrem ben Zohar. Let him sell me the cave of Machpelah that he owns, which is at the edge of the land. Let him sell it to me at the full price for a burial site in your midst. Efrem was present among the Hittites, and so Efrem said, the Hittites answered to Abraham in hearing the Hittites and said in front of the entire gate, in front of everybody, no, my lord, hear me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the presence of the people. Bury your dead. You don't have to buy it. You can take it. Then Abraham bowed low before the landowning citizens and spoke to Efrem in the hearing of the landowning citizens and the citizens. So again, in front of everybody, if only you would hear me out. Let me pay the price for this land. Accept it from me, and I may bury my dead there. Efrem replied to Abraham, saying to him, my lord, you hear me. This piece of land is worth 400 shekels. What is it between you and me? Go bury your dead. Abraham accepted Ephron's terms. Abraham paid out to Efrem the money that he had named in the hearing of the Chesed, 400 shekels of silver, at the going merchant's rate. So at Rose land in Machpelah near Mamre, the field with its cave and all its trees everywhere within the confines of the field passed to Abraham in his possession, and in the presence of all the Hittites of the assembly of the town's gate. So what are some questions that are arriving? Yes.
Okay, one that I'm sure everybody else is thinking of. Okay, we have evidence in the Bible, which the Islamic people do sort of accept. I mean, they accept Abraham. We bought land. I mean, if they can say, I mean, Hebron, by this account, belongs to us. The cave of Machpelah. Do they ignore this? That's number one. Number two, my first reaction that there's a cave in the land says to me that it wasn't prime property. In other words, it was not level land. It was something in the middle there. That
Okay.
you couldn't work around. Okay.
All right, so I think there's an interesting piece there, right? Like there's definitely some layers of this ancient history that goes on to our current conflict today. Hebron is probably the trickiest of all cases within the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Specifically because of the 1929 riots, they really turned everything on its head. It's a conversation for another time, but this is the first case of like, hey, no, I have a deed. And that actually story comes up very often in modern history too, of who had the deed and who has the ownership of the property. And I think that probably a place to really play it into. I'm not sure if the Muslims do share our history kind of in an oral way, and they have their own text to follow it. But the idea in this text is very clear. Multiple times it says this transaction happens at the gates of the city in front of all the people. Right, this idea that this needs to happen in a very public matter, so no one can say I didn't buy this land. Any other thoughts or reflections that are going on? Yes.
Yeah, it's clear that at least at first the Hittites do not want to sell the land to Abraham. Okay, they're saying, you're so special, just take the land. But Abraham realizes that, that it's going to be much better, obviously, if he owns the land. And the fact is that this is the Israelites' only legal claim to the land. And it's going to be after 400 years of slavery when they finally have a chance, they're moving towards it to reclaim it. So you see the foresight that Abraham is showing here, and his shrewdness in negotiating for this, because when Efrem says 400 shekels of silver, that's a lot, and it's not clear whether he actually wants to sell it at that point. But when Abraham says, yes, I'll pay for this, now you see that he is happy to get that money.
Right, I think that's excellent. Like, there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? And there's something that's going on here where they're like, no, don't worry about it. Bubba, you can just bury your dead here. You don't need to have the property. We trust you. We care for you. You can bury it here, and we won't talk more about it. And Abraham is seeing something under it and saying, no. I need to actually pay for this. It won't work out well for me if I just get the brand new car, right? I need to get it. I need to pay for it. Yes.
I've got 2 points. Number one, since that cave was not worth anywhere near 400 shekels, whatever that coin was, does that mean that he really bought the whole surrounding area also?
And that's what the text says.
Yeah,
It says he buys the entire area, the whole block.
No,
He bought the cave and the fields around the cave.
around the cave actually that starts going up a hill where the settlers are. Yeah, in Kiryat Arba,
Right.
so it's around the hill, so there is a definite central area.
Yeah, it definitely, that, he buys the immediate vicinity around the cave. That's what seems to be clear from here.
The second point was, he's the son of Zohar. Is that just an English Zohar or is that the Zohar?
No,
Same-
those are not in the book there, it isn't the name of a person.
And, is it the same spelling or is it completely different?
Let's see. This is Torah 9, and this is Zohar. So it's not Zohar.
It's wrong in English.
It's wrong. There'd be a little dot under the H there to tell you that it's Zohar, and Zohar, but we don't do that so much in our English. Yeah.
English typewriter.
Yeah,
Two things. One, and maybe because it's highlighted, the assembly in this town's gate. So it would seem that maybe this gives us the idea that if you have a contract, maybe you should do it out with witnesses. I know for some reason, because otherwise, if it's two people, even if they sign it verbally, then there's always possibilities for problems later on. Number two, to me, it's interesting. He buries in a cave, not in the ground, because I know at that time it was a fashion, and I'm curious where did things change? Because location wise, it was even later on that people were not buried in the ground, they were buried in niches and in caves, and that eventually the bones, the flesh dried out, the bones. I think that's what they say when you're gathered into your kin, all the bones would be taken together and put it in one spot. So it's interesting, and I'm curious when we made the switch from burying in caves and things like that to eventually burying in the ground.
right, and so, yes, absolutely, the idea of doing any sort of business transaction without witnesses is a definite no-no amongst the rabbis later in the later generations. They're very clear about it, but you need witnesses. Our most obvious places where witnesses happen are weddings, right? But we are very clear to say, it's great when you're trying to give out honors at a wedding and you're the rabbi at a wedding, say, oh, I need 2 witnesses to make sure the ring is kosher, I need 2 witnesses to make sure that the contract's kosher, the ketubah's kosher, and I need 2 witnesses to make sure that no one's gonna bother them right after the wedding. Right? And I got 6 witnesses right here, and I cleared it out, and I felt myself out a little bit, but it's very important within Jewish law that transactions don't happen privately, because just like in any sort of civil matter, if things happen in the darkness of a back room, people are gonna have 2 different opinions as to what actually happened. When he does it in front of more than 2 witnesses at the gates of the city, there is no dispute. Everybody sees. He gave them 400 shekels, got the land. There's enough to go on, that's almost reminiscent of our major revelation moment, right, at Sinai, right? We're all witnesses at Sinai, not just a few people that go up to a mountain, but every Jew is at Sinai. That's the idea of everybody's there in these major moments. Right, you need to have public transaction.
It's interesting that they don't have, with the Hittites, that they didn't imprint this on a stone or something, that it was simply oral witnesses, never written down.
Right, I assume that that's actually the nature of the Hittite, right? That the idea of writing it down written, remember, that's like revolutionary at this time of this text, like the idea that you can write it down on a stone, right? That's starting to happen, right? To the south of us, the Egyptians are doing that, and to the north of us, the people who are writing in uniform are doing that. But it's really not happening in a larger world until like this moment. Like this is the age of, hey, that's a good idea. Let's start doing that. So that
Where would you keep it? Since all these countries, all these people disappeared,
correct, right?
there would be a problem.
We don't have the team. We don't have the we don't have the text to really go off of anymore. And the second piece you had mentioned, which was the burial. I'm not actually sure when that happens, although I will say that the burial in a cave is still a burial into the earth, right? And the rabbis are very clear to mention that, like, you're burying into a cave, and you're not putting them on top of the earth, you're putting them into the actual ground. So from a halachic standpoint, you're still doing earth burial. At some point, yes, there is, we definitely see within cultural, evidence of bones drying down and pieces like that. I mean, that's not atypical for how bodies break down in general. But yes, they were put into the cave, into the earth is the idea. So let's look at what Rashi has to say about some of this. I have some of this I'm gonna jump on a little bit later when you guys hear me on the pulpit, but Ger v'toshav anochi imachem, right? I am a Ger Toshav, I am a resident alien. And he really points out, and I think that the text is really interesting. Usually we use the word Ger Toshav. Again, I'll talk about it later. This says Ger v'toshav. I am a Ger, a foreigner, v'toshav, and a resident, right? It's not quite what Ger Toshav means. Ger Toshav means I am like green papers, right? A Ger Toshav is someone who is not a citizen of the country, but is a resident alien. I am both a stranger and a settler, right? I'm a stranger having come from another land, but I have settled down amongst you. So he says that he takes it as just Ger Toshav, but of course he'll give you some midrash here. Yeah, this is what I love when he does this. My midrashic explanation is Abraham is ready to say, if you agree to sell me the land, then I will regard myself as a stranger and I will pay for it. But if not, I shall claim it as a seller and take it as my legal right. Right? So Rashi is giving Abraham a little bit of muscle here. Because he said, unto the seed I give this land. Doesn't matter whether or not the Hittites want to give me this land or not. God has already given me this land. I don't need to buy it. God has promised it to me. But I will make the deal. I will be in the Darchei Shalom. I will be in the way of peace. And I will buy it, even though I already have I already own the land. Rashi's trying to really harp on this is Rashi being a historical character, right? Rashi is living amongst the Crusades, is dealing with the fight that's going on in the global world at the time, which is the Christians saying this is our land, the Muslims saying this is our land, and Rashi without an army says I'll pull out my pen, I'll write in here and say no, you're both wrong. This is actually my land, and that's how he fights his battles.
Just because God promised the land to Abraham, that does not mean he promised to give it to him for free. Didn't say he's not gonna have to work for it or buy it.
Interesting.
Right, so it's interesting, right? So Rashi's first comment on all of Torah, I don't know if anybody's ever read Rashi's first comment on all of Torah. He brings up this really great question. He says, why do we have Bereshit in general? Right? We don't need Bereshit. We need halacha, we need Jewish law. Why do we need all these stories? They're not really pertinent to how I live my Jewish life. And so he says, the reason for it, again, respond to the Crusades, I really think, he says, is because these stories establish that we own the land. Not the other people who are currently in the land, but God promised it to Abraham, and that's why we have these stories. Otherwise, we could just start right at the end of the plagues, when we get the declaration that you need to keep your months. And that's the first halacha, the first Jewish law in the Torah, right? Like, we have other ones that are mentioned, that are referenced about, but there's not so much what you as a Jewish person need to be, how do you live your life until that point. And so Rashi says the whole reason for anything before that is to establish we get our land.
Can I say something to answer to Ron? He said we got the land for free. No, the Israelites fought for this land.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Well,
It was not for free. They lost people. They got so
I mean,
fighting.
even when Joshua went in, they had it wasn't just given to them.
Exactly.
Right, well,
It was not for free.
that's the tension of that piece, but what Rashi is saying is, we own the deed whether or not we pay for it or not, because ultimately the original owner of that deed is not the Chittim, it's God. Right, that's Rashi's line. So it's not up to the Chittim to give the land to Abraham. It's up to God to give that land to Abraham. So he's trying to really pull it and say, it's very nice what Abraham's doing. He's paying for this land, but he doesn't really even need to do that because it's God's given land to him. When God says this is your land, God's the one who gets to choose who gets what lands, not
But when
people.
you get paid for it, it has much more effect for other people. Just like when you steal something or when you win it in battle, there's always a question. Isn't that the question in Israel? So we won the Sinai, we won Gaza, we won Jerusalem. So what? They're still contesting it, but when you buy it, then there's some evidence there was a transaction.
I mean, they still might contest it too,
Yeah, we might contest it, okay, yeah,
but
the lawyers
you're
will
right,
get,
but there's more weight to it. There's another layer. There's that financial civil transaction. I saw someone on Zoom had their hand raised.
No.
Nelson, go ahead.
But even if the Jewish people own the land, that doesn't decide which Jewish person owns the land. Even if all of us have a claim to it, those are distinct claims. They have to be settled. So Abraham gets title to his particular piece of it, even though God gave the whole thing to Jewish people. It doesn't matter.
Right, although Abraham, we all are like that, the idea is we're all descendants of Abraham. So if he buys the land, we all have a stake in it, right? That's why even today, someone converts to Judaism, right? They get called to the Torah, than Abraham, right? That is who they are descendants of, right? Because we all have a stake in that, in whatever Abraham did, right? And I'll say it a little bit later, but you know, this is there's a principle in Bereshit that we often share to our students, that says Ma'aseh avot siman lebanim, right? The actions of the fathers are messages for us, for their children, right? And I think that this is the case here. This is a lesson that we are learning from Abraham about if you whether or not you own the land or not. Maybe there's a Darchei Shalom piece here. You still make the payment to try to let everybody know. There is no doubt whether you believe in my God or you don't believe in my God. Everybody now is on the same page. Whether the Hittims they're not part of our people. They're now in this understanding now, even if they didn't understand that God gave it to us.
Yeah, and back to your point about why we have Genesis, that we could have started later, you know.
Rocket point. I don't want to take it
How God, but I mean, you know, God creates heavens and earth, right? So that's theoretically, in principle, God owns the land.
Correct.
God, therefore, God has the right to distribute it.
That's exactly the right point.
That's one thing, but and the second thing here is that Abraham is kind of paving the way for Isaac here. I mean, he's not sure what if Isaac is going to be, you know, an effective heir yet. We haven't heard from Isaac. You know, I mean, Isaac in chapter 22, right, I think, isn't even mentioned. And, you know, he's kind of traumatized after the Akedah at this point. So Abraham goes ahead and prepares the way for him. You know, he's old, he knows he's going to pass, and this is going to be something that Isaac and Ishmael also will come together to bury Abraham. But he's got the plot, he's got the burial place, and again, it's Abraham's foresight. Okay, and then of course, you know, the other things, finding a wife for him. These are all things that
Right.
are making it easier. Isaac.
He's doing his advanced planning,
Right.
right? And like, by the way, this is something we see today in even our modern culture. Often death is a taboo in our society. People don't want to think about their burial plots. So their spouse dies. And then they realize, oh, wait a second, I need to take care of that for myself too, before before my children have to take care of that. And he buys a plot piece of land that's much bigger than what's for Sarah. And that's why multiple generations are buried in this piece of land, because they think that's like from a human perspective says, hey, I realize I need to take care of this. This doesn't need to go on to Isaac. Yitzhak does not need to take care of this, right? And his children, his grandchild who hasn't even been born yet, shouldn't have to deal with this either. And that's why, in fact, when you look at the next source, like the Malbim, right? He says, a resident alien does not usually purchase a family burial plot because he does not intend on remaining. Right? You don't buy a plot somewhere and then move. Conversely, a resident does not need to buy a plot because he possesses his own land. Avram, however, has been a resident alien, sojourner, until now, but he would like to become a resident. That's why he's seeking to buy a burial plot. So this is Malbim, I'll get to you in a second. This is Malbim saying, the reason why you buy your plot is to make a declaration. This is where we're really gonna start turning to. This is where I'm going. I'm not leaving from here. You saw me walk to Egypt a little while ago. I'm not going back to Egypt. My home is here, and I will remain here because I can speak for majority of people. They want to have their loved ones buried close enough to them that they can go and visit their loved ones. They don't want to bury someone and go somewhere else, right? We've dealt with at Hebrew Tree Burial probably the stickiest situation we sometimes dealt with, where Soviet Jews who came to America and they had no understanding of their Jewish tradition and had cremated their loved ones. And the question of were they allowed to bury them at our cemetery, or bury the remains? And we actually, under Orthodox halachic jurisdiction, allowed for those burials to happen because they did not know what they had. They had done something that was not permitted according to Jewish law. And the idea that this is going to make this a place where this is their new home, right? This is going to be a place where they can feel connected back to it. Yes.
Yeah, but the Hitim then are agreeing to allow, they're consenting that Abraham and his family can stay there. Because otherwise they can say, we don't want to. And that could have been why the price was high also.
That could have been why they want to give it as a gift. All these different pieces now play into it that are 100% on there. That it's not just about, oh, I want to make some money. It's actually about, oh, this is a real declaration about what the status of the Efrem, of the Hebrews, are going to be in this land. This is now, he is no longer Ger Toshav. He is no longer the resident area. His green card has been revoked. He now has a passport, right? This is now a new status.
Yeah, remember Jacob's body is carried back.
Right. Although, yeah, Jacob's body is going to be buried there. Joseph ends up getting buried up in Shechem,
Yeah,
somewhere
but
else.
he wanted also to be buried in Israel and not in Egypt.
Right, because it becomes the status now of, this is where we bury our people. By the way, one of the most frustrating things, again, now that I'm in a little bit more in the burial business, that I see is the cost for people to get buried in Israel. Right, there's a real desire. First of all, beautiful sense of Aliyah. If you are an Israeli citizen, that is part of your taxes. You get a burial in the state of Israel. It's just a little fun fact. It's in your municipality. So if you live in Tveria, you're buried in Tveria. You don't get to say, oh, I want to get buried in Yerushalayim. But it's free for the citizens. But when a American wants to do it, and rightfully so, I think, because it's high value, but it's challenging. There's such a demand for people Jews to want to get buried in Israel, that the cost is exorbitant to get buried in Israel. And in fact, to make it according to Jewish law, they've created these whole almost parking lot systems where they bury in the land. They put a second level. They put dirt in the second level, and they bury in the dirt in the second level. And it's like you go up the elevator, you go visit your family member on the 4th floor, because that's how you have to do it according to have them in the earth. But there's a whole business about it because yes, this starts this tradition. We want to be buried in the land, and that's why. I mean, again, the land is so. With the exception of a military cemetery in Israel, you're not buried in a coffin even in Israel, right? You're buried in your shrouds right into the earth, right?
Rabbi Shafter, oh no, I think they took the coffin.
Right. To be transported, you have to be in a coffin.
Yeah, I think they took it away and then.
But when you're in a burial, except for a military cemetery, and that's because they don't want to embarrass anybody because if they've had any injuries. They don't want them to be noticed to be different than anybody else. You're buried into the earth without even a coffin, because the idea is you're going to go back to this land. This is so special.
How much is expensive?
If you're interested.
Yes, curious.
Expensive. Well, we can talk after. They're very, depending on where you can be buried.
And make Aliyah.
Yeah, if you make all the, you know, I do know someone, my right aunt, she has made Aliyah, she still lives in New Jersey, but she made Aliyah because her family, her children have made Aliyah. And she wants to be buried in Israel, so she made Aliyah, her residence is her son's residence, but it's done that intentionally to play around this loophole a little bit. And so it can be buried at a family plot that is in their yishuv. Because that's the challenge that sometimes happens. So I want to actually, I'm gonna actually look, and so we can have more discussion. Let's pull back up to this map. What do you notice about where Hebron is? Right, I have a map of ancient Judea. Absolutely. What do you know? Yeah.
It's far from Jerusalem. It's the center of Judah.
It's the center of Judah. I don't think that's unintentional as to where we're trying to bury Abraham here. Right?
But wait a minute. This is not the kingdom of Judah. Judah didn't exist when Abraham.
Correct. Did not exist, but if you look at where the land is, even within what is ancient Israel, right? What is ancient, like the places where Abraham is traveling to, right? He goes to Hebron, a short tradition, the Akedah happens in Yerushalayim. He goes to Beersheba. It is right in the center of all his travels. I don't think that is a coincidence. I think that the idea is he is not just being put on the outskirts of the land, even though the text says maybe he's on the outskirts of Hebron or Kiryat Arba, really. He's on the outskirts there. I think it's very intentional that he's doing his burial right in the heart of the land. Right, by the way, where today we have the most conflict about this whole situation because it is right in the heart of the land. I'm going to bury my loved one there because that will make it that I'm sealed in this land forever. You can't partition me to the south, you can't partition me to the north, you are partitioning me right where we're going to live.
The amazing the story in the Torah, that goes back, 3,000 years.
If he wasn't buried there, they wouldn't have a problem today.
Right, again, the actions of our fathers are messages for us today, right, for our children, right? That is he is establishing himself in the land, in this space, right? To say, this is a space that I'm not so quick to give up on, right? So I purposely show that because I think that it's really intentional. He could have been buried in Beersheba, would have not even thought about it if he had been buried in Beersheba. He could have been buried further north. It's like his family, actually, his family came from up in Syria down. He came from Syria down, so it would have made sense for him to come all the way from there. He's being buried there to make an intentional statement. This is the place where I wanna establish myself. Right, and by the way, that's why, again, I'll flip wait, did I go the wrong way here? The previous source, just so you see it. Orach Chaim, right, another source says, even if Efrem had decided to give the field as a gift, if he had demanded a gift, Abraham begged Efrem to accept the money, so Abraham would accept the field. If so, Abraham would have accepted the field as a gift. If he'd given it as a gift, he could always have said, this just so you could bury a person, not so you own any property. Property ownership is essential to declaration of your rights. Right, and then, listen, even in America, in America, the first people who got to vote were property owners. Right? You have
Also, he wanted to be able to be buried there too. And if he hadn't paid for it, they could have said, when Abraham's time came, oh, sorry, we gave it to him.
Something given without consideration be taken back just as easily.
100%. A gift is only, it doesn't have any weight in the same way. Yes.
It's all about continuity.
Mhm.
You look to the past and you look to the future. and burial is established as that.
Right, and by the way, just think, I think this is actually, I don't know if you've ever looked at the building, this is the actual Mara de Machpelah. This is, where it happened, for the last, this is a long while now at this point. It's partitioned. There are 4 sections in Mara de Machpelah. There is, the Avraham section, and then there is, there are 3 sections. There are Avraham and there's Yitzhak and Yaakov that are on the other side of the section. Since Baruch Goldstein murdered a bunch of Muslims at that moment, it's now been partitioned for all but 20 days out of the year, where only Muslims go into the Avraham section and only Jews go into the Yitzhak and Yaakov section. This Shabbat is an exception. There are 10 days in the year, I don't know them all off by heart, where the Jewish community has the rights to the entire Mara de Machpelah. And there are 10 days in the year where the Muslims have ownership over their area too, right? The entire area. So that way, there is still kind of like a balanced shared system that you can go to Avram. There are people who are literally camped in tents around I don't know about this year, might be a little bit tense this year to do this, but there are tents camped around the tomb, and people will go in and will actually be able to go into Abraham's tent after davening Shacharit in Israel and see the Abraham tomb.
But they always had, in the 70s, they had a separation.
They did, but they allowed for people to go between the two.
Yeah,
Now they don't allow for people to go between the two. Now they've actually closed off after that
well, you
shooting.
can't even, they don't even want you to go to Hebron. I mean, today to go to Bethlehem, I know when my daughter wanted to go to Bethlehem and Hebron, you know, it was not something you did easily.
Right, and that it isn't easy to go there. It is a challenge, and Hebron often around this area looks like a ghost town because it's so secure that the Muslim community is not being allowed in there, and the Jewish community isn't really going in there either because it's just such a hotbed of tension. This is the heart of the heart of the heart of the conflict, is this one area. If you wanna understand the complexity of the whole situation, Hebron is the case study for that complexity. So I want to actually contrast it to someone else in the ancient world. I told you I was going to do some Roman stuff. So on the bottom here we have Cassius Dio. Cassius Dio is a historian in Rome, and he's going to talk to you about the burial ground for Augustus. Right? So when Augustus was consul for the 11th time, but Calpurnius Piso, he fell so ill, once more he had no hope of recovery. Augustus was going to die. He ends up living many more years, but he was going to die. At any rate, he arranged for everything as if he were about to die. And he had gathered about him all the magistrates and all the senators and knights. He did not, to be sure, appoint a successor. So people are freaking out. This is actually what people usually do this about, is he doesn't really have a successor. Although they were expecting that Marcellus would be prepared for this position, but after talking with him a while about public affairs, he gave Pisa the list of forces and the public provisions in his book, and handed his ring, right, the ring, the signet of power, to his buddy Agrippa, his military general. He didn't give it to Marcellus. All right, that's important for what we're doing, but it's a very important point in history. This is the end of Marcellus. And although he lost power of attending even to the most urgent matters, a certain Antonius Musa restored him to health by great means with cold baths and cold potions. He got his medicine and he recovered. For this, Musa received a great deal of money from both Augustus and the Senate, as well as the right to wear gold rings. Free now. And he granted exemption from taxes, both for himself and for his members' possession, not only for those living at the time, but also for all his future generations. He did a really good job as a doctor. But it was stated that he who had taken to himself the functions of fortune or destiny should be speedily caught in the coils. For though Augustus had been saved in this matter, Marcellus now fell ill, and not long afterward he was treated by the same way as Musa and died. Augustus gave him a public burial after the customary eulogies, placing him in the tomb he was building as a memorial to him, as a memorial to Augustus. He puts Martellus in the mausoleum of Augustus. And finished the theater whose foundations had already been laid by the former Caesar. So if you go to Rome today, you go into the major place, there is the Martellus Theater, the ruins of that, it still exists. That's what Augustus makes in his honor when he dies. Martellus was his nephew. And it was thought that this was going to be his successor. This was going to be the next in line. You can see even then Augustus had some doubts. They're in close proximity, they don't understand germs, they don't understand any of the medicine of our days. Augustus gets better, passes his disease on to Martellus. Martellus dies. And Martellus gets buried in the place you see on the bottom of this picture, the tomb of Augustus. So when Rabbi Foster was at Hebrew University, my closest friend probably since we were 8. We went to Vermont, Canada together. And I hadn't seen him in a year, and so I said, let's meet halfway. You fly from Israel to Rome, and I'll fly from America to Rome, and we will go and spend a week in Italy. And we go, and I'm like, this is my heaven. I was in the heart of my studies of Roman history, and I said, we have to go to the mausoleum of Augustus. This is such an important place for Augustus. I have to go there. And if you, by the way, if you compare the pictures, you get up there, we go off the beaten path, we go further north, although not so far north when you see the map, and I'll show you that point there. And it is a trash heap. There is garbage everywhere. They've been out since remodeled it, but vagrants are using it as a place to live. Unhoused people are living in Mausoleum of Augustus, and this place that actually does hold Martellus, Agrippa, Augustus, Tiberius, Nero, Claudius, all the Roman emperors of that time are all in ash in this building. Right? Right? It may be, I mean, if you want to have faith, again, I've heard a lot of speeches about this the last month and a half. The power of Hakar is powerful, right? This is the greatest empire in the world, and this is what their mausoleum looks like, and this is the people who have been downtrodden, and this is what their mausoleum looks like. And you see them side by side, and you have a little bit of an amazement, a wonder of like what happens to one and what happens to the other. But I had to go there because when you look at that last picture, you see a picture of ancient Rome. And you see up in the top left, you see the Campus Martis, where like a lot of the major pieces are happening in the ancient Roman world, where Augustus is really building his capital, right? Augustus is really rebuilding this. You know, his famous line, his last words when he does die years later is, "I found Rome in wood and I rebuilt it in marble." Right? He is doing his rebuilding, and that circle, if you go straight up from the Campus Martis, that circle that's right there, that is the mausoleum of Augustus, right at the very top of the thing. He builds it right on the Tiber, right next to where all his big buildings are going to go, for the same reason. I'm changing the empire. It's no longer a republic. It is imperial. I am the emperor, and I'm not going anywhere. Right? That is what often happens with burial grounds. I put my burial ground right in the place where I want everybody to know I am not leaving from this national landscape. Right? And if you think about it, you can do this over and over again as to characters in history. They're often buried in places to make it stand to say we aren't going anywhere. And this is just an ancient piece of it. So it was a very interesting parallel to me of how Abraham sees it, envisions it, and 1,000 years later, Augustus is doing the exact same thing again. And again, we could keep on going further in history, and we could say, you know, while it wasn't done as intentionally, where Arlington is buried or built, or Arlington is put, and John F. Kennedy deciding to be buried right there, there's a mindset of my ethos is not going to leave this area either, right? And again, when we get to modern history, right? Where do we put, Herzl's not buried at Har Herzl. He's buried in Europe. He dies in Europe. We reinter his body and we put him in Yerushalayim.
Huh.
We are saying we are not going from this land, right? It is a message that we use often. Our final message is a statement of, this is the place we have settled. And so it's a nice little teaching, I think, for ISR. Any questions? Oh, I thought it was 9:50 was what my I can give you another burial story. You guys know the story of Jabotinsky's burial?
Tell
You know, you've heard of Zev Jabotinsky.
Sure.
Father of the revisionist Zionist movement. Really the father, I'm currently reading a giant biography, I've been buying this giant biography of him. He is the founder of the Jewish Legion in World War I, right? He's the founder of the Haganah. He's the founder of the Irgun. He is the reason why you have an IDF today is Jabotinsky. He believed that Jews could no longer wait for other soldiers to take care of them. We needed to have it himself, and he was often ahead of the curve. The other Jewish leaders said, no, we don't want to do that yet. And he was like, no, we need to have this. World War I, he has this great fight with the leadership. He says, the Ottomans are going to fail. And if we get on the front lines first and we fight and take over Eretz Israel, we'll have the land now. The British will love us. We will be the soldiers who will liberate. And the rest of the Zionist cause says, what if the Ottomans don't? They'll hate us for it. They own the land currently. Have you seen what's going on? They're not going to win. They don't listen to him until very late. He ends up founding what's called the Zion Mule Corps with him and Trumpeter, and they carry things along. So he's often at end with all the Zionist leaders because he sees things in a very, this is the way you need to do things sort of matter. There's no compromise. There's no, we need to be a certain way. So he is exiled from Israel by the British. He's a scary character, British don't let him in. He ends up at the end of his life in New York City. He dies fairly suddenly, and he's buried in Long Island. And in his will, he says, when the Jewish state exists, I want to be reinterred when they ask for my body back. This is actually, it hasn't happened. When there is a Jewish state, they should ask for my body and bring it back. 1948 happens. David Ben-Gurion is the prime minister. He hated Jabotinsky, did not like him, and said, I'm not bringing his body back. And his body remained in New York all the way up until 1967. This is where I think it really kind of gets eerie for me. Levi Eshkol becomes prime minister and says, what's the big deal about a body? Let's make Menachem Begin happy. This is Menachem Begin's mentor. Make him happy. He's not my ally, but whatever, it's not a big deal. Request the body. There's a major procession, a funeral. He's buried, and when you go to Har Herzl, he's buried in a separate area. There's a separate area for the grave of Jabotinsky. A few months later, tension starts rising in Israel, and Levi Eshkol wants to make a unity government to prepare for war. And he goes to Menachem Begin and says, will you join my unity government? And he said, of course. I know I can work with you. You took care of my people. I can take care of your people. Right? The fact that he was willing to bury Jabotinsky still had a hand in the 6-Day War. Right? Because the fact that he was willing to bury Jabotinsky's followers were said, that's great. And in fact, they even did something even more kind of amazing is Menachem Begin said, I'll only join the coalition on one condition. He's not part of my party, he's part of your party, but Moshe Dayan has to be the Minister of Defense. If you do that, then I will join your coalition, we'll have a unity coalition. And the rest is history, right? The 6-Day War happens, the general who's supposed to be in the place happens, all because things happen in the right time. Because this person was buried at the right time in the right place. If he had been buried in 48 by Ben-Gurion, this story doesn't happen. It's a really awe-inspiring story.
And there's a major street in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
My husband's cousin lives on it.
Yeah.
What about Naphtali Hertz, Imbar? Is he also the author of Hatikva? I think he also was not buried in Israel.
I mean, most of the Zionists from that point were not buried in Israel. I mean, Herzl did not like Inbar, right? Like that was a whole nother thing. Like he wasn't a worker. He was a poet. He didn't think that that's what we needed for the state. We needed people on the ground building, making ditches. So it didn't work out for Inbar. He made Aliyah and made very down. I don't know where he ended up.
And to what extent does the organization for which you work inform people who would like information about what you call proper burial? So prior to a time of need, they'll have that information and they won't get into conflicts with family members, et cetera. Does your organization do that?
So yes, we do that. I can speak a little bit about Hebrew Free Burial Society. My boss would be really upset. Hebrew Free Burial Association. We are the Hebrew Free Burial Association. We have been around since 1888, with the mission of indigenous Jews should be able to get buried with proper kavanah, with proper respect. That being said, we run the whole gamut, right? So there are people who have all the funds they need to do a burial, but they come to us because we do it as a nonprofit, and they pay full price for our full price, which is still less than anywhere else's full price. And they are buried at our cemetery. We have 2 cemeteries we maintain. And we take care of that. We also do educational pieces to teach people about, and by the way, a little plug, I will be coming virtually to your shul for 4 sessions about death, and rituals around death. That I'll talk about the Har, I'll talk about funeral and burial and prep and what we do at all these different, these moments. But we do that educational outreach too. A lot of what we're doing is giving dignity, is letting a Jewish person know they have a Jewish community when they don't have anybody left, right? The most powerful, even though it's the saddest story, the most powerful story that I think we ever come across in my organization is people who are on the unclaimed persons, right? There's a national database of people who died and have no next of kin, and they're sitting in a medical and examiner's office, and it's really a sad story. And we will do the research. Well, it's not perfect. We will see someone who has a name that seems Jewish in one way or another, whether it's, Rachmanov from a Russian name or Goldberg from an Ashkenazi name. And we will then do the archaeology research, the genealogy research, and we will look and we'll say, oh, look we found their mother's tombstone and had a Star of David on it. It's buried at this cemetery. We can therefore do this burial, and we will advocate on behalf of the Jewish community with the medical examiner. Let's say, usually this is in New York, medical examiner in New York, and say, we would like you to release that body so we can do proper burial for that person. At which point they come to our facility, we get some proper tahara, the ritual preparation. We give them everything. Our rabbi on premises will do the funeral. We'll send a message out to our volunteer minyan group. And a volunteer minyan group will come and help to bury the body, and we'll do the actual burial piece, and we'll take Kaddish for this person. And it's a message of you're never alone when you're part of the Jewish community. We're there to support you. And so that's really the heart of our mission, is to just remind people you're never alone. If you want, we have a great mailing. So if you guys want to be part of our mailing just after Shabbos, sign up for our mailings. You can get our newsletters.